Welcome in one and all to the Three Tech Takeout, our Monday night recap, preview, extra spillover thought show right here live on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, and in your podcast feed on Tuesday morning. I'm Trey Reeves. I'm joined tonight by Garrett Turney. Garrett, we off the emotional high yet? Did SEC shorts get you enough through this Monday following that big win for A&M?
I got to tell you what, man, rolling into work this morning, knowing that I was going to see fans of LSU, fans of the Texas Longhorns, getting to kind of showboat a little bit and ask what happened up in Nashville and stuff like that. It just kind of felt nice for a change to just have, taken care of business with absolutely no doubt at any point in time in the game. Nope, none at all. Zero doubt.
That's right. Yeah, there's no doubt at what point, what quarterback switch. We didn't have to completely change our offense in the third quarter.
I'm pretty sure Marcel Reed's been the starter this year. What are you talking about?
Yeah, Marcel Reed is 4-0 as a starter. Exactly, right?
Oh. It was great, though. I got to tell you what, it was a lot of fun doing that, and then getting to watch SEC shorts and come right back down to earth as battered Aggie syndrome said everything that was going through my head at any point in time this season. I was like, oh, yeah, no, I've thought that, that whole doomsday scenario with Texas coming to College Station and ruining the season and kicking us out of Atlanta. I've thought about that. Sure. So, it's not an Aggie podcast. We're not going to hang around with the Aggies too much on this podcast. We do like the Aggies, obviously. We did graduate from there, but it's just nice to continue to, let that one ride from the weekend. And I'm going to make no qualms and no apologies about it. That was a lot of fun. And, that doesn't mean that I'm any less nervous about this weekend going up against a plucky South Carolina team.
Plucky, putting it lightly. I'm full on DEFCON 5, I think, in the whichever one's the bad one. I think
this defines letdown spot.
Yeah, coming off an emotional high, going into a tough environment, a scrappy team that's desperate for some wins. Absolutely, tough defensive line. We'll talk all that game on Thursday as you guys will listen to it, but tonight's kind of for our spillover thoughts from the weekend, looking ahead to some midweek games. And Garrett, we wanted to start tonight first with some news. Mike Bloomgren was fired by the Rice Owls. I think on the job for a few years there, had quite a bit of success by modern Rice standards, went to a couple of bowl games, but a 6-game losing streak in this season is what did him in. The loss to UConn will be his final game as the head man at Rice. I don't know where you go if you're Rice. I don't want to speculate on candidates, but you could look at maybe a lower level G5 head coach, maybe someone like a Kinney from Texas State. I don't know. That'd probably be a lateral move. Maybe the Sam Houston State coach. But yeah, I think you're probably looking at a coordinator or someone of that ilk if you're Rice. And I just don't know that that's an upgrade. I get wanting the best possible, but Bloomgren was in a really tough situation this year with all the talent that he lost, and just seems like a little bit of an odd time to pull the trigger mid-year.
Well, and it's hard too because in the state of Texas, you have so many teams that just exist kind of in the same area, and you're fighting over lots of talent, which is nice, but it does mean that, when you're trying to build your program and you're trying to build it up, you have to stay on the top of the pecking order. And number one, Rice has academic standards, and so that's hard. But number two, there have been a lot of teams kind of come up and become programs that people are, noticing. UTSA, obviously a program that people have been kind of noticing, has been blowing up over the last couple of years. More recently, even this year, Texas State, Sam Houston, right? It's a couple of teams that are, regional to you, but, have become – it's easy to think, yeah, these teams have kind of supplanted your position in the football pecking order. And so – it's a tough situation to be in, obviously. Not really sure where they go from here, but if they made that move because they felt like they needed it, okay. There's plenty of guys, there's plenty of talent. You're going to have to kind of claw your way back up to the top of that. I don't know if it's third tier pecking order and maybe third tier Texas teams. And then you got the teams above them are like the, TCU, Texas Tech, Baylor, people in that tier. And then obviously, A&M and Texas are probably at the top right there. So, yeah, just a lot that they got to do to kind of climb back up, build back up, and we'll kind of be rooting for them. I don't, wish any ill will towards Rice or anything. Just got to kind of, build back up.
Yeah, they've been successful in the not too distant past, right? We've seen them win 8-9 games.
They're good last year.
They were pretty good last year. Yeah, like I said, they had a lot of talent that left the program, not the least of which a McCaffrey, right?
Yeah.
But hey, I got a name for you, Garrett. It's a guy with not only ties to the state of Texas, but the ties to the city of Houston.
Okay.
Has head coaching experience at the Power 5 level, mind you.
Okay.
Tom Herman, your next Rice head coach.
Isn't he with the Owls already?
He is. It would be wouldn't need a new
move.
mascot. He's at
Yes.
Florida Atlantic.
He does well with the birds, so maybe that could be a move. That could be fun. I thought you were going like Dana Holgerson or something. I was like,
Oh no.
I'm like, that's a move right there.
How old is Dana Holgerson at this point? I think he's up there.
Let me get a estimated, or where is Dana Holgerson? Where in the world is Dana Holgerson? We're gonna make that game.
Casey Keeler at Sam Houston. I would say a rising name, but he's also 65 years old. I think he probably wants to finish out this build at Sam Houston, maybe call it a career. Don't know that for sure. Obviously, everybody has their price, but I mentioned Casey Keeler. Might not be as attainable as you might think. He might be a guy that just wants to finish out at Sam Houston. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Guiding that transition. Garrett, that's the only big firing. Of course, we had a couple last week as well that we mentioned.
Well, UCF fired their DC as well. So
yeah, Ted Roof out as the UCF DC. Thank you for mentioning that. Good riddance, I think. Most UCF Knight fans. And if you look at UCF Twitter, they kind of hope Gus Malzahn is not too far behind him. And I don't know if this is the last-ditch effort for him to maybe get one more coordinator hire and save his job, but they're certainly not living up to their lofty preseason expectations.
If he gets another chance, it'll be make sure you nail the coordinator or you won't make it out of next season. It'll be one of those, we fire the whole thing 6 games in next year if the whole thing doesn't turn around. So he's got to figure it out. And it's I think he's stuck. This is the problem that you're going to see with so many teams and so many programs now is they're going to stake themselves onto one transfer class. And they'll stake themselves to the wrong quarterback or the wrong receiver or the wrong defensive end or the wrong offensive tackle. And now all of a sudden your season implodes because the guy you thought was it is not it. Turns out KJ Jefferson, maybe not it for what they were hoping to do there. So, it's a tough situation, right? You got to figure out how to play the portal, and the portal can turn your season and your program around in 1 year. But that means it can go one way or the other. You can turn it around in a positive way, or you can whiff. And we see what's happening currently in Florida State.
Yeah, and that used to be you tie yourself to a coordinator and that desperation coordinator hire. Now it is more player centric, and I guess that's an improvement for the coaches. You get more shots at the target, maybe.
Right.
But yeah, it's a dicey situation in Orlando. There was a time that I was really looking forward to the Arizona UCF game. Both teams 3-5 going into that one this weekend. It's the space game at UCF too. So not
because there'll be lots of space in the stands because they're 2 bad teams.
I think there will be, and I think it's also
UCF. No hate, it's all love.
I forgot what time that game is kicking off. I'm pretty sure it's an afternoon kick now, which definitely takes the air out of the space game. That one needs to be a big night game for it to have a lot of juice. Garrett, speaking of teams that either haven't had a lot of juice or we just haven't given the juice, we want to start off tonight with our something for the table, our appetizer, if you will, here on the Three Tech Takeout. Give some love or maybe some not so much love to a few teams that we just have kind of dropped from coverage or not, frankly, done a good job of covering this year as the storylines have played out. So, Garrett, I'll give it to you. Who do you want to start with tonight? Who do you want to give the spotlight that we've maybe neglected or undercovered so far this year?
Well, man, I got to talk. There's a contender to win the whole thing this year that we really haven't talked about on this show at all. And it would normally go to, it normally stand to reason that, you would talk about the contenders, right? We've talked about Georgia. We've talked about Ohio State. We've talked about Oregon. We've talked about Texas. We've talked about all these different teams that we think could win the whole thing. But there's a team that's going to be competing for their conference championship. There's a team that currently is beating opponents at a 27-point per game margin. And we just really haven't talked about them a whole bunch because they've been beating their opponents at a 27-point per game margin. And in a season where there's been chaos, we haven't really needed to. I'm talking about the Clemson Tigers. We have not talked about the Clemson Tigers on this program a whole lot this year because overall, it's been kind of a ho-hum, kind of boring year for Clemson. Not that they're playing poorly. It just hasn't been a whole lot of worthwhile conversation about Clemson. They go, obviously, we know about this, that Georgia, they lose to Georgia at the beginning of the season. They get smoked. They weren't ready. It is what it is. We're talking, is Cade Klubnik ever going to make the jump? Is Cade Klubnik ever going to be that guy? We don't know, right? And then they just rattle off, 6 straight. They, beat Appalachian State, 66-20. North Carolina State, a lot of people are excited about that one. Thought big things out of the Wolfpack. They beat them 59-35. They beat up Stanford, Florida State, Wake Forest. Not necessarily anything too impressive there, but they really drum them. And then Virginia, a team with a pretty solid offense, they go out there, they beat them 48-31. I mean, what else do you want out of a team, right? There's a lot of good going on for Clemson right now. Phil Moff has been effective. He hasn't necessarily been, a massive part of the game, but he's getting 15 carries a game, so he's definitely their lead running back, but they haven't had to lean on him, right? They haven't had to make the run game the entire personality of the team, right? And that's huge because, number one, you want to, if you're a running back, not wear yourself out before you hit the league. So that would be nice to not, wear your entire, wear out all your knees and your shoulders and everything else. And then you go get drafted. You got like 2 years to play in the NFL before you break down. But also, you stay fresh over the course of the season. And Cade Klubnik has been ascending. Like, he has been really, really good this year. Let me pull his season stats for a second here.
I got him for you if you need it.
I got him right here. I got 66% completions. He's thrown for 1,800 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Trey, that's pretty dang good. And that's, not on loads and loads of pass attempts. He's thrown 219 times, but it's not like some of these quarterbacks you see putting up big numbers, having thrown the ball 300 times at this point in the season. He's just getting it done. They're just scoring effectively. He's been a threat in the run game as well. He's ran the ball 41 times, 227 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's, not necessarily a scrambler, but he can get it done with his legs from time to time. There are some issues on the defensive side. We can talk about those in a second, but man, Clemson's been fun. They just haven't really been in the spotlight this year because, frankly, they haven't had to be. It's been a season of chaos, and, Clemson's been very business as usual.
Yeah. They teetered on the edge of disaster after week 1 with the way that they showed up in that Georgia game. But the Cade Klubnik revenge tour has been something to behold. Gary, he's all the way up to 5th in the Heisman odds at plus 1,500, I believe. Yeah, plus 1,500, just behind Ashton Genty, Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and Dylan Gabriel. So it is something to behold. I think the key has been his development and not having to rely on Phil Maffa like you have in the past. He was the whole offense at points the last couple of years. So seeing that offense develop and have a true passing game, have Caden Klubnik be a true dual threat. And you mentioned the defense struggling a little bit. A lot of those yards are coming in garbage time because they're just blowing teams out that they frankly should blow out from a talent disparity standpoint. Yeah. And got a little bit of Indiana in them. I'll say that. Like, they don't have a win that blows you away on paper, right? They've beaten App State, North Carolina State, Stanford, Florida State, Wake Forest, and Virginia. Not world beaters.
Right.
But the way that they're beating teams, a lot like we've talked about with Indiana. Not playing the toughest schedule in the world. Obviously, they had their big test week 1, and they weren't ready. It would be a closer game. I'm willing to say at this point that it would be a closer game against Georgia. I'm not going to go as far as to say that they would win or even cover a hypothetical spread, but it would be a much closer game.
Well, also not playing it in Atlanta would help too.
Say it again.
Not playing it in Atlanta would help too, right?
That
like not help. Playing this. It's basically a home game for Georgia, except you increase capacity. Like that's I don't know. That's just kind of crazy to me. But here's the thing I wanted to emphasize. So the defense has played better. They haven't necessarily been amazing. Like you said, some garbage time yards, and there's a couple of numbers that stand out. The one thing I want to point out, part of this is game script, but part of this is just overall effort. The rushing totals this year have remarkably gotten better. So looking against Georgia, they let up 169 against Georgia. And then in the next couple weeks, they give up 149, 179, and 236 on the ground. Definitely trending the wrong direction if you're a Clemson defense. And you're starting to think at some point, hey, we got to watch out for the run. Like, this is not great. And then you look at the next 3 weeks. They give up 22 rushing yards to Florida State, 87 to Wake Forest, and 68 to Virginia. They're just not giving up rushing yards the last couple weeks. Massive improvements on that side of the ball. They do kind of need to keep some people out of the end zone. I think a lot of Clemson fans would probably agree with that. That some of the better teams they played this year have been able to score. Yes, I know that it's garbage time, but you'd like to see a complete effort out of your defense. But yeah, overall, like Clemson's been playing really good, and I don't have any doubt that if they turned it up to 100 and went out there and played a quality opponent, not too many of those right now in the ACC, but they go out there and play a quality opponent, I guarantee you Clemson go out there ready to go and ready to whoop some people up. And I'm excited to kind of see how they close. The close of their schedule is the part that I'm excited for. They play Louisville this week, and then they go at Virginia Tech, at Pitt, to finish off with the Citadel and South Carolina. That's a juicy close. They're going to have to go through there. They're going to have to run the table through that, obviously. They want to find their way to the ACC championship game. Louisville maybe not as good as we thought they were. Virginia Tech not as good as they thought they were. Pitt, we'll see if they're for real. But that's a couple teams in the ACC that if you don't show up, you could stub your toe before you go up against a rival in South Carolina at the end of the year.
Well, I'll take us another direction here. I'm going to stay in the ACC. I'm going to stay positive for now. I got a negative one here in a little bit, but I want to talk about the Duke Blue Devils, Garrett. And this was something that I was really ready to talk about if they could hold on and beat SMU or kick a short field goal, but a huge effort on a field goal. It's a block from SMU on Saturday night, steals the win for SMU. They win it in overtime. Duke's 2-point conversion attempt is no good, so they are not able to knock off and upset SMU. But they're still 6-2 in year one under Manny Diaz, and I think doing quite a bit better than most people projected at this point. We looked at who they lost in the portal. We looked at any time you lose a guy like Mike Elko, you expect a big step back. Manny Diaz was a solid hire, I thought, for Duke to try to replace Mike Elko. It was in the same vein of a defensive-minded head coach, but they've certainly done a lot better than I expected this year. But I think they might be this year's Syracuse that we talked about in the last few years, where we're just really asking, yeah, they've got 6 wins. Yeah, they're already bowl eligible, and it's not even November. Are they actually any good? And I think that's a legitimately fair question. Not to take anything away from them. Winning, you got to win the games on your schedule, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's by 1 point or by 50 points for a team like Duke. But they sprint out to that 5-0 start. They've lost 2 of 3 since, losing to Georgia Tech and SMU. They gave SMU all they could handle. They got 6 takeaways in that game. But it's really been the way that they've won. It's been really close. They don't really blow anyone away. They have 4 wins by 1 score or less. And now, thanks to SMU in large part, they're plus 12 in the turnover margin. So they're doing a good job of getting more takeaways than they give away. But, Malik Murphy, he was supposed to kind of be the hotness at quarterback. They really haven't asked him to do a lot. They're not throwing the ball downfield. It's like 6 yards per attempt or something along those lines. So it's a lot of short dink and dunk stuff. The close is fascinating to me. They close at Miami this week, a game that if Miami's not taking it seriously, I think it could legitimately be a close game. I think Duke could ugly this one up and be a problem for Miami. Then they're at NC State, an underwhelming team this year. Virginia Tech at home and at Wake. So sitting at 6 wins, if they can split these last 4 and they're sitting there at 8-4, that's a magnificent year one for Manny Diaz. And I don't really care what the 8 wins look like. If they got 8 wins with the roster that he inherited and the roster that he had to cobble together through the depths of the portal, hats off to him, man. And he's maybe in consideration for ACC Coach of the Year in my mind.
Definitely in consideration, because when Mike Elko left Duke to go to Texas A&M, obviously that's worked out fantastic for him, fantastic for the Aggies. We are happy with the hire as A&M fans. But a lot of people just kind of wrote Duke off, right? They're like, hey, this is, oh, well, good try. You had your coach. He was good for you. It'll be another little walk through the wilderness till you find your next coach. And I remember even for myself, I'll go hands up on this one. When they hired Manny Diaz, I kind of giggled to myself. I was like, oh, cool, Manny Diaz. That'll be fun. And look, I'm guilty of that. He's been pretty good. He's done a pretty good job so far, and I didn't expect him to. He's cobbled together a roster. Clearly had the evaluation on Malik Murphy. He's not, I don't think, a world-beating quarterback. He's not even completing 60% of his passes, but getting it done, moving him down the field, leaning a little bit on that run game. One guy I really want to shout out, Jordan Moore, sticking behind, though he could have probably left and gotten another opportunity. stayed behind. He's got 34 catches on the year for almost 500 yards. He's averaging 14.1 yards per catch. So that's pretty dang good from a guy who, maybe for all intents and purposes could have and should have left after
Yeah, he
everything.
and Star Thomas have kind of been their entire offensive plan at
Yeah.
this point.
And good on him for sticking behind. He could have left. Like, he had opportunities. I would have thought he would have had opportunities, but instead stayed behind, and he's kind of been the star of the team. And while you don't necessarily look at their schedule and find a quality, win, you thought maybe Florida State could have been, but it's not. You're looking at that. I'm thinking maybe UConn's the best win on their schedule. Maybe North Carolina after the way they just played, but I don't know, man. Like, this is really one of those questions of, are they actually good, or is the ACC just kind of bad? I don't really care. Like, if I'm a Duke fan, I don't care. We've won 6 games. We have officially, solidified a bowl game spot. They're going to get to play in a bowl game in year 1 under Manny Diaz. They're going to get to go out there and pitch a vision to recruits. And their program is up and off the mat in year 1 after Mike Elko left.
That vision thing that you said is the biggest thing to me, because you have to have a proof of concept. This program was dead in the water as recently as this summer in the minds of pretty much everybody outside of that building, right? And now I would say they're probably going to be favored at least in the Wake Forest game, maybe road favorites at NC State. I don't know about at home against Virginia Tech, and they certainly are decided underdogs this weekend. But
yeah,
I mean, 8-4 is not all 8-4s are created equal. I obviously know that, but for a conference where we in the preseason cited so many teams that had favorable schedules, if they could just take care of business, I'm not going to fault Duke for taking care of business against a favorable schedule.
And Duke wasn't one of those teams we really talked about. Like, we talked about a lot of teams being able
to. We
to
actually joked because our listeners voted them way higher than we would have had them. They voted them at like 11th, I think, in the ACC. And we were like, they're probably going to be closer to 15th or 16th.
Right. And like, good for our fans. That just shows that they know stuff.
They know ball.
But what I will say is this, the fun storyline, at least going into this Miami game, is their coach is Manny Diaz. Yeah. And there is probably a whole lot of, we're going to go in there. We got house money. No one thinks we can win, but we're going to play some dang good defense. Let's throw some trick plays out there. Let's take the safety off of Malik Murphy and let the cannon unleash, right? If you throw 5 picks, doesn't matter. Let's just sling the ball downfield, get it done. Because if anybody wants to get this upset, it's going to be Manny Diaz and those Duke Blue Devils. So
absolutely,
I think they go for it and get. I don't think they're going to win the game, but I think they're going to give Miami just about all they can give. They're going to force Miami to make another couple calls to the conference office after what Manny Diaz is going to give them.
All right, well, Garrett, let's go very quickly. We each have one more team. Let's quickly go through those last 2 teams so that we have enough time to talk about games from last weekend and our midweek preview.
Yeah, man. My second team that I really wanted to shout out is the Florida Gators. And I didn't think we would be here. I think a lot of Florida fans are sitting here like, hey, who'd have thought? Not me. Because, look, Florida, for all intents and purposes, was dead on arrival with the beginning of this schedule. Their schedule at the beginning of the year, we were joking, do they even find 2 wins on the schedule? We had made jokes about what was going to happen to Billy Napier after that Miami game and, how he was going to get treated and maybe, cease to exist or whatever else. And we made so many jokes about how Billy Napier is going to be out of here. We joked early on even, like, does he go to DJ Lagway if he needs to? Like, is he going to be that desperate to go to the freshman and abandon Graham Mertz? And it hadn't exactly worked out that way, but DJ Lagway is the quarterback of your present, and he's got some stuff to be excited about. There's a lot to be excited about with DJ Lagway and the way that he can bring your team up a level. He's got spark. He's got something there. Maybe not as consistent as Graham Mertz. Maybe not going to bring you the high floor that Mertz brought you. But with Mertz being injured, you'll take Lagway. And they've had a lot of injuries for Florida, and yet, if you look at what had happened, let's go through the storyline a little bit here. Get dunked on by Miami, beat up Samford. Nobody really cared that much. And then A&M comes in there and embarrasses you in your own house. You do this weird, rotating between the quarterbacks, not really sure of yourself thing. And fans were calling for Napier's job at the half. And the post-game shows from the Florida fans were just miserable. And now don't look now. They've won 3 of 4. And that includes a really close overtime loss to Tennessee where they had a chance maybe to go for 2 and win that one. And, they, obviously elected to just play it safe and ended up, losing because they played it safe. But I don't think a lot of people expected very much from this Florida team after they lost to A&M. I think a lot of people expect them to roll over, myself included. And now you look at them, they've got, 1, 2, 3, 4 wins on the season with, not a lot of hope maybe necessarily in this last part of the season. They played Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. So kind of a murderer's row right there. But I think there's some belief in that Florida locker room that, they can maybe string something together. I know they're looking at Ole Miss being a little bit down right now, not necessarily the Ole Miss team we thought they were. I know they're licking their chops to go beat Florida State at the end of the season. And if they can get that done, then they beat 2 of the 3 Florida teams on their schedule. And in my mind, Billy Napier saved his job.
If you can get to a bowl game, they've got to have some really tough conversations because, quite frankly, no one expected them to do that. And he's doing it what would be with a freshman quarterback at that point. He's going to beat Florida State. I feel very confident in saying that at this point. I'm struggling to find the other win, though, because it's Georgia and Jacksonville at Texas, LSU and Ole Miss at home, and no bye weeks in between. So, I think they're going to be in every single one of those games at some point. I think they're going to be competitive games. Ole Miss, maybe you circle that one, but if you lose 3 in a row, how much trust do you have in the locker room and how well are they getting up for that one? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out down the stretch, but this is the stretch of the schedule that we were circling preseason of saying, ooh, that's absolutely brutal.
See, but we also looked at teams like Kentucky and UCF and didn't give them a whole lot of a chance in those games either.
That's true.
They figured it out. If they go 5-7, does Billy Napier still have a job? I think he does.
No, 5-7 is not going to be good enough.
I mean, look, if we
right or wrong, I think that schedule lends itself to 5-7. I think their Vegas over under, I can't remember now. I have it down in a spreadsheet somewhere, but I think it was either 5.5 or 4.5. So 5-7, not out of the question based on that, but from the standard of Florida and what Florida thinks of itself. Not saying they're wrong, by the way.
Right.
5-7 is not going to.
Well, and the other question is Kiffin's availability. Obviously, a lot of people looking at Lane Kiffin as possible next Florida coach.
I think that would be the stupidest move they could possibly make.
And it sure might be. I think that would be a bit of a mistake. But I know that if that's what they want to do, then it may not matter if he pulls off one of those. He could go beat Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss and then followed up with beating up Florida State, and they'd still probably opt for Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I don't think Kiffin's doing himself many favors right now. I think if he was opting for a big job, especially complaining about 11 a.m. kickoffs like he was today when he can't beat the 15th place team in the SEC at home, not going to get a lot of love from potential suitors there. I want to go out west for my last one here. Let's talk about the Arizona Wildcats because the last time we covered them in depth, Garrett, they had knocked off Utah and were sitting at 3-1, had a not pretty loss to Kansas State on a Friday night, but they knocked off a top 10 Utah team, 3-1, still alive in the Big 12 and ergo in the playoffs. Since then, they've lost 4 straight. And Garrett, for a team that got screwed by conference realignment in more ways than one, losing Jed Fish, having to move from their traditional conference home, I'm ready to say that they made a big time mistake in their hire. Brent Brennan, I know it was late in the game. I know that it was a difficult time to get a hire in because Jed Fish left Washington extremely late in the cycle. They're kind of grasping at straws there, but I'm ready to say that hire was poor. And it was underwhelming from the word go. I really didn't see what they saw in him from his time at San Jose State, but I might be ready, depending on how the season cuts out, to cut ties after year one and just try to start over and try to rebuild and reestablish yourself in the Big 12. The offense has lost all of its magic, and it's not the players because they have a lot of the same skill position players that they had just last year on offense. Defense might be even worse than the offense. And those 4 straight losses, man, they are sitting at 3-5 and just absolutely wasting Fafita and T-Mac. And it's just a travesty because we were so excited to see what those guys could do in the Big 12. And they're just not being allowed to succeed. They're not being allowed to have the success that they had last year under Jed Fish. So The close is interesting. I mentioned off the top that they're at UCF this weekend. They have Houston. That's certainly a winnable game at home, at TCU and Arizona State. So on paper, I wouldn't call any of those games losses in a vacuum. But when you look at what they've actually put on the field this year, I see, a UCF team that is desperate for a win. If they have any fight left in them at all, I'm not sure they do. That's certainly a winnable game. Houston's a rapidly improving team. I almost chose the Cougars for this segment. Houston's a rapidly improving team that's already knocked off TCU and Utah this year. TCU offense is going to cause that defense a lot of problems, especially on the road. And Arizona State, they're licking their chops to beat Arizona after what's happened in that rivalry the last couple of years. So none of them are guaranteed losses in a vacuum, but none of them are guaranteed wins either. And if they don't make a bowl game, I'm ready to cut bait. I'm ready to start over and try to find a new guy for next year.
Yeah, I think the problem is if you're trying to make a bowl game, you need to convince me that they can win 3 of 4, right? That's where they are. They need to win 3 of those 4. I don't see 3 wins there. I mean, I can't tell you which ones they are for sure, but if you're telling me, is it more likely they go 3-1 or 2-2 and 1-3 or 0-4? I would take any of the options below 3-1. Because
if it's 0-4 and they end the season on an 8-game losing streak, he shouldn't even be invited back in the building as soon as he's done addressing the team after the Territorial Cup. He should be given his papers.
And the issue for me is I didn't think this was a great hire in the offseason. A lot of people were pretty optimistic on this one. I thought this was maybe the second worst hire behind hiring the running back coach over at UCLA. That didn't make a lot of sense to me either, and that's panning out to be true as well. He just doesn't have any experience, running a big-time program, and that's, okay. Lots of coaches don't get there yet. Maybe he's ready in 5 or 10 years, but ain't there yet. And right now he's in over his head. It's been a realignment special, and so you got a little bit screwed with the realignment. The coach left. You got to put some of it on the players. I'm not trying to put this completely on the players because I know that if you're being coached poorly, there's only so much you can do. But in what world should Noah Fifita be 11 touchdowns and 10 picks? You got to take care of the football regardless if the scheme's bad. Throw the ball away, right? Or find something else. I don't know, man. I don't want to go completely in on the coaching staff. Players have to execute plays at a certain point, or they have to just not make bad decisions at a certain point.
Isn't it the same thing we're seeing with Jalen Daniels, though, where it's just very obvious that the scheme is not fitting? Maybe even Connor Wegman closer to home at this point. The scheme is just not utilizing the gym that you have on the roster. And A&M's lucky because they have another guy they can go to. Kansas and Arizona don't have that luxury, and we're seeing the results, in my opinion. I agree. Don't throw interceptions. But if the scheme is not utilizing your best skill sets and putting you in a position to succeed, it's hard for me to fault the player when I saw him not throw interceptions just last year.
And that's why I don't want to put it all on the players. At a certain point, you got to find a way to play ball. If for nothing else but your own personal pride and saying, I'm not going to throw 10 interceptions in a season, you got to find a way to not turn the ball over, right? And, some quarterbacks like to sling it. Fifita sure seems to like to sling it. I'm not concerned about the other numbers from him in terms of progression or not. I'm concerned about the picks. I'm concerned about not taking care of the football because part of that's going to be coaching and scheme, but part of that's going to be I threw it in a bad spot and now, ball's going the other way. So, look, I'm not going to put it all on the players. They're not being well coached right now. That's a tough spot to be in. Not great for Arizona. I think they got screwed when Jed Fish left, and I thought he was kind of what was making the program go. It goes to show that's what a good scheme ball coach can do. He can bring you up, or you can rely on him too much and he can bring you back down. You can think about, similar things across college football. You get a scheme coach and then he takes off. You mentioned Kansas. That's a great example of that is, hey, look, Penn State's offense looks pretty dang good. No further questions about Kansas, Your Honor. Don't want to answer any questions about the Kansas offense anymore. It goes to show you that can sometimes happen.
2025 Florida State quarterback Noah Fifita, who says no.
Whoo! 2020. Never mind. I'm not going to go there.
If Mike Norvell is actually still there, who knows? Garrett, let's talk some really quick thoughts, if you have any, on the late night matchups from last week. A Colorado 34, Cincinnati 23 was the big one after dark. Travis Hunter became the first player in Big 12 history to earn both the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week and Offensive Player of the Week in the same week. Dude is just unreal. We're running out of words to describe him. His second touchdown catch of the night was coming back to the ball from Shadur that was a little bit underthrown. He comes back, tracks it down, and then beats a man into the end zone. Colorado's arrived as a true playoff contender at this moment, and that feels really weird to say after what we saw them put on the field against Nebraska earlier this year.
Yeah, and I don't know if they'll do anything if they can make the playoff. I don't even know if they have the wiggle room at this point to find their way there, because there's so many teams. Well, not really so many, but there's a couple teams in front of them that control their own destiny in the Big 12, and I don't really think that Colorado's probably in a position to win an at-large bid just based on their resume. But man, like this is a fun team. They're turning it around, and let's address whatever the elephant is in the room. Look, Deion Sanders is doing a good job right now, but oh my gosh, do we need to pump the brakes on the hype? They're doing a good job. We want to root for you. And then when Stephen A. Smith says stuff like the Aggies should have hired him and Florida State should have hired him.
You just tuned Stephen A. Smith out on college football, man.
Go watch. I'm serious. Go watch the short that got put out on YouTube by Walk On Red Shirts. I'm going to shout out our friends over there. I thought they did a really good job talking about this. Number one, Norvell was already hired at Florida State. Deion was not in any position to coach Florida State when that job came open. So strike one on that one. And if you're going to try to convince Aggie fans that Elko was the wrong hire and you should have brought in Coach Prime at this point in the season on a Monday following the LSU win, you're not going to convince Aggie fans that Elko was the wrong hire. Might have had a point with some of the Bama guys, but I can't think of a worse culture fit than Deion Sanders following Nick Saban and trying to coach Alabama. Stephen A. doesn't know what he's talking about for college football, but this is what I'm talking about, right? Like, I want to root for Colorado. I want to get behind them. And this one wasn't on Prime. This one wasn't Prime hyping himself up. It was other people hyping up the program and saying ridiculous things. But there's just kind of an attitude around this one where they need to kind of calm down with some of the hype. We will root for you. We want to watch Colorado succeed. If Colorado makes the playoff this year, could you imagine? That would be nuts. That would be absolutely insane. I'd root for them in any game that they played outside of if they're playing my team. But let's just pump the brakes, guys. It's a good year. If they go 9-3 and barely miss, fantastic.
Well, I want to challenge that real quick because I think below 10-2 would be disappointing at this point because they close. They're off this week, so Stephen A. will not be watching any college football this week.
That's a bummer.
They close at Texas Tech. Their offense could give Colorado's defense a lot of trouble. Colorado's defense better than advertised this year.
They're playing a lot better. They've improved. They didn't start the year good, but they've definitely improved over the course.
They've improved quite a bit.
Playing a lot better as a unit.
At Texas Tech, it's tricky to play in Lubbock. That could be an interesting game. Utah at home. I'm not scared of Utah at this point. I'm not scared of Utah on either side of the ball at this point. At Kansas, we talked about how disappointing they've been this year. And then the last place team in the Big 12 who still hasn't won a Big 12 game, Oklahoma State at home.
That still feels wrong to say.
It's sad but true.
I mean, it's realistic. They could finish 10-2. And
I think whether or not 10-2 would be disappointing. I think if you lose any of those games, again, in a vacuum,
right?
Injuries, whatever, notwithstanding, in a vacuum, losing any of those games at this point with Big 12 title aspirations and therefore playoff aspirations and therefore top 4 seed in the playoff aspirations would be extremely disappointing for Colorado. And that's not a place I expected them to be going into November.
Yep. And to think about how close they've been to be able to control their own destiny, they lose to Kansas State by 3. I mean, that's not a bad loss to a very good
It was a defensive meltdown on the last possession too. They should have they took the lead and maybe left a little bit too much time for Kansas State, but they melted down and let Kansas State answer in 3 plays.
And they weren't there earlier in the year versus Nebraska, or else we're talking about a possibly undefeated team right now, which would control their own destiny and have the ability to go on to the playoff. As it is, that Kansas State loss might stick in their teeth a little bit if they end up being the odd man out, if it's, BYU and Kansas State or BYU and Iowa State at the end of the year, and the Big 12 championship, that could be a real, just kind of food stuck in their teeth and not quite feeling okay about that. I'm not rooting against Colorado at this point, but please, oh my God, Colorado, don't give me a reason to start rooting against you. Like I don't need that. I don't need that kind of motivation. Just let's chill out with the headlines. Let's have some fun, celebrate your team, have a great time, just chill out a little bit.
Elsewhere on the late night slate, Washington State kept their slim playoff hopes alive. 29-26 over San Diego State. They got ranked in the AP poll. So obviously the AP poll voters were not watching that game up late. They just saw that they won the next day and voted them in because nothing that they did. Yeah.
That very much survived that game.
Nothing that they did gave you confidence more so than what they had already shown this year. So Washington State gets the dub on, again, one of the crappiest college football fields I've ever seen. I don't know what was going on in San Diego. They were kicking up dust and mud, it looked like. And
I believe it's better. San Diego.
Yeah. It was what that movie says. It's that is Spanish for. It was comparable to that field.
Correct. It was pretty bad.
I've seen 2A middle schools in Texas with better fields than that. Garrett, let's get to the midweek menu. We've got a light slate this week, to put it kindly. Not the big marquee matchup that we've been used to the last few weeks. I think Fox has World Series blocked off on Friday night, so that's kind of been the saving grace a couple times and the spot for a big football game. But let's take a look at what we've got this week. I'll start off with the trio of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday highlights. I'll let you take it wherever you want from there. Tuesday night, we've got Louisiana at Texas State. This one is a big pivotal matchup for the Sun Belt West. Louisiana sitting at 6-1 and undefeated, but Texas State is 3.5-point favorites at home in this one. Wednesday night, we've got Jacksonville State at Liberty. Liberty just a 2-point favorite at time of creating this document, so shine is completely worn off the Flames, it looks like, and Jacksonville State at 3-0 in CUSA play. And then Thursday, Tulane faces, I think, somewhat tricky game at Charlotte. Charlotte's been plucky at times this year, but they're 16.5-point favorites. Take it wherever you'd like, sir, out of those three games.
Yeah, briefly to talk on it, Tulane is going to have a little bit of an issue with Charlotte. Charlotte played Memphis really, really close this last week. I think they're playing a little bit better. Tulane's got to find a way to go take care of business. I'm not too worried about it. Their run game is lethal, and it feels like every time I'm watching Tulane, I just see a guy hitting the sideline and then he's off. So that's Tulane for you this year. I think the one that's going to catch my attention is going to be Louisiana versus Texas State. This is going to be the one that I think means the most. Obviously, there's stakes involved in this one when it comes to Sun Belt, and Louisiana might be the best hope for that conference right now.
They are the best hope for that conference by far.
Yeah, when it comes to trying to find a way to make the playoff. And so, I'm not to say that, conference office is calling this one in, but they got to find a way to win, and they got to find a way to, make anything happen so they can find a way to win this game. Texas State, should win this one based on all the numbers, but Louisiana is the better team right now. They're playing better right now. They haven't played as many people, but they are playing better right now. Got to find a way to survive a tough one in San Marcos. I'm not sure that they find a way to do it, but I think just if I'm thinking about teams and what's at stake and what they're playing for, I do think Louisiana finds their way out of this one. I like Ben Woldridge. He's playing pretty well this year. I like this one.
Our friends over at College Football Insiders, this is the closest projected margin of victory I've ever seen on their website. It is Texas State by 0.05. So
wow,
about as razor thin as you could possibly get. I think the Bobcats get it done at home. I don't think they're out of magic yet this year. I also like Jacksonville State on the road. I think Liberty's reeling a little bit, and you see what Vegas thinks of Liberty with them only being 2-point favorites at home. So Jacksonville State seems like they've got things figured out. I'll take them on the road to get an outright win over the Flames. Friday night, we've got another trio of games. UConn is looking for bowl eligibility. That would be a huge milestone for that program. 7.5-point favorites at home against Georgia State. A battle of Florida teams in the American, South Florida at Tom Herman's FAU Owls. Maybe future Reds coach Tom Herman's FAU Owls. And San Diego State, they are quietly, I know they just played Wazoo really tough. We just talked about that. They're also quietly 2-0 in Mountain West, and they're going to Boise in a big Bronco letdown spot after their grinded out win against UNLV last week. Same thing, Garrett. What are you looking forward to on Friday night?
I'm looking to see if San Diego State's going to tear up that blue turf. I don't think they're going to be able to tear it up like they did their own stadium, but that's going to be the one that probably gets most of my attention. I do want to watch UConn a little bit. Want to see if they can get that bowl eligibility. That'd be a lot of fun. Get a little UConn fam for the podcast over here. So, shout out our UConn community that we got over here. But probably watching San Diego State and Boise. Look, anytime you get a chance to watch Boise on TV, you do it. Because Genty is about as good as it gets, and you want to make sure you can find your way in front of a television to watch him. He's must-see TV.
Yeah, really rooting for UConn to get it done and make their second bowl in 3 years. That would be just absolutely huge for that program. And I was just double checking to make sure I was correct. Yeah, only one of their wins so far is against an FCS school, and they don't play another FCS school. So they've got 4 shots at bowl eligibility down the stretch.
Come on.
Georgia State, at UAB, at Syracuse, and at UMass to close.
Oh, they'll get it.
I think they'll get it. Yeah, and really might be closer to the 7 or 8.
Might get a couple, yeah.
Yeah.
They could beat UMass.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I wouldn't count them out in any of those 4 games. Even at Syracuse, they could be a big problem for the Orange, especially if Kyle McCord's fancying throwing 5 interceptions.
Yeah, if McCord wants to throw 3 pick sixes, I'd pick UConn in that one. UConn minus 21 is the spread in that game.
Man, I don't think we can count on him to do that again, but it was certainly entertaining last Thursday night.
Yeah.
Garrett, thanks for joining me tonight, my friend. We have a lot to talk about on Wednesday night for you guys to hear on Thursday morning with our preview show. And as always, make sure that you are subscribed, following all those good things on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and click the notification settings so you know when we go live on Saturday night to break down all the big Week 10 action. Will we be celebrating again, or will we be with our beloved battered Aggie syndrome, like in SEC shorts? Who's to say? We'll see Saturday night, Garrett. For Garrett Turney, for Mitch Mason, I'm Trey Reeves. We'll see you guys next time.
Gracious, how about